Hello, my name is Florian and I welcome you to IT Tech Tips. In the last video of our Setting Up the Lab series, we've downloaded and installed Oracle VirtualBox. In this video, we're going to download and install a Windows Server 2019, which will become the future primary server in our lab. Let's have a look. So, before we can begin our installation, we need a media to install the server from. Because we do not have a physical server, but only this virtual PC we can install the server on, we need to download an ISO file. The ISO file will then be used like an optical media, but it's just a big file on your hard drive which we will mount in Oracle VirtualBox, and to the virtual PC it will look like an optical drive, like a DVD drive. Just as a quick disclaimer, everything we're doing here is strictly legal. All ISO files we are downloading from Microsoft are licensed for testing purposes, and they are also timely limited. You will see that in a few moments. First, navigate to your favorite web browser and do a Google search for Windows Server 2019 ISO download. In my experience, that's much quicker than finding the download on the Microsoft page directly. You do have to make sure, of course, that you download only from a Microsoft page. So make sure that the URL, the internet address, is correct. If you pick the correct link, you can scroll down a little bit and you see there's the Windows Server 2019 evaluation, which runs for 180 days. And after that, you have to reset up the server. Make sure that you choose the ISO file and click on Continue. Here you have to enter some information about you. You can enter whatever you like. We do not want additional information. You can keep the checkbox and click Continue. When selecting the language, make sure you choose English. We do everything in English as IT professionals regarding server. Then click Download. And you can save the ISO file, which will have a really long file name. We're going to change that in a few moments. So, I sped up the download a little bit so I don't waste your time. And it's done. Open your download folder and there you see this really long file name. You may notice that the file name has no file ending. Well, it has a file ending, but it's not shown yet. Rename it to Windows Server 2019 so we can access it later more easily. Very importantly, go to View and check Show File Extensions. Now you see that's an ISO file. In my opinion, this checkbox should be selected by default. This is a huge security risk. There were several viruses, for example the infamous love letter in the year 2002-2003, which was only possible to infect so many PCs because by default file extensions are not shown. So if you set up a new system, a new server, a new client, the first thing you should do is to show file extensions. That's it. You now have the ISO file, which we can later mount to install the server from. There is one more preparation step, just a tiny one, before we begin installing the server. Because we want everything in our lab setup well structured and clean. Navigate to Windows Explorer and go to the place you like to have your virtual PCs on. This will be the SSD we've mentioned in the first video. So Go to the place, create a new folder, and name it VirtualBox. Create a subfolder named acme-dc01, being the name of the server we're going to install. Now open Oracle VirtualBox by double-clicking the icon on the desktop. Click on Tools, then on New, and enter the name of your virtual PC, acme-dc01. Choose the folder you have just created. Click Select Folder and notice the types of operating systems available. We have Windows as the main category and Windows 2019 64 bits. The suggested memory size is a little low. We're going to double it to 4096 megabytes. And we're going to create a virtual hard disk now. So choose this option, click Create, and the type will be a VDI, a VirtualBox disk image. This is just the native version of a virtual hard drive for Oracle VirtualBox. It doesn't really matter what you choose, but I tend to use the default values because usually this is less support in the future. Here we have two options, dynamically allocated and fixed size. Dynamically allocated means that you start with a really tiny file on your SSD, which will then grow as necessary to the size which will be the effective content of the drive. If you would choose fixed size, VirtualBox would create a file which has the same size as the whole virtual hard disk. And this will waste a lot of space on your drive. So for example, you could create a virtual hard drive which would have the size of 1 terabyte, but on the disk in the very beginning it only uses like 10 megabytes. And then it will grow until it's full and will have 1 terabyte. Dynamically allocated is a little bit slower than fixed size, but on an SSD, which we are using here, this really doesn't matter at all. So choose dynamically allocated and click Next. We have to increase the size a little bit from 50 gigabytes to 120 gigabytes. Then click Create. And we almost have a prepared system. Click on the system you've just created and then on Settings. Click on System. And here you see the memory size we've created in the wizard. But for the CPU we only have 1 core, which is really bad nowadays. So we have to increase that to 4 cores. Quick tip. If you have several virtual machines, say like 10 virtual machines, and you give each of them 4 cores, but you only have 8 cores in your system, so you would need 40 cores, you can assign this anyway, and this is called over-provisioning. It's a technical term you may need to know if you work in an enterprise environment with virtual machines. Now click on Storage, and here you see the hard drive we've created and the empty slot. And in this empty slot we're going to assign the ISO file we have just downloaded. So choose a disk file and navigate to your download folder or wherever you place the file. Choose Windows Server 2019. And click OK. Then click on Acme-DC01 and on Start. Here you will be asked again to choose the optical drive. I don't know exactly why this is happening, so just make sure that the Windows Server 2019 ISO is in the selection. This is to demonstrate an error which may occur on your PC. Have a quick look at it. So why is this happening? You can only click OK on this message. This is happening if you have Hyper-V, this is the hypervisor we've discussed in the first video, installed parallelly to Oracle VirtualBox. These two hypervisors on most systems don't get along very well. So to build this lab in Oracle VirtualBox, you have to make sure that the Windows feature Hyper-V is deactivated. Please only do that if you haven't done any work yet in Hyper-V, otherwise you will not be able to run those virtual machines again. If you need to keep Hyper-V, I assume that you already have some knowledge in working with virtual machines and hypervisors. Then I suggest that you follow these lessons, but instead of using Oracle VirtualBox, just do the same thing in Hyper-V. So now I have deactivated the Hyper-V role, rebooted my system, and then I clicked on Acme-DC01 again and on Start. The virtual PC will start again, load the files, and as you can see, it will run stable and continue to the first prompt, where we will choose English United States and the keyboard or input method which matches your physical keyboard you have on your system. Then click on Install Now and choose Windows Server 2019 Standard Edition with desktop experience. That's really important, otherwise you would have to do everything in PowerShell. Of course, you will read through the whole licensing agreement, accept it and click Next. And here we choose Custom Installation, only to check that the hard drive is correctly mounted. You see, that's the hard drive we've created with the full size of 120 GB. Despite on your SSD it only uses about 10 megabytes at the moment. And the installation will run for about 10 minutes to half an hour. So go grab a coffee. The system will reboot automatically after the installation. By clicking on the top right on Do Not Show This Message Again, you can get rid of these helpful tips from Oracle VirtualBox. The next prompt you will get after several reboots is to enter a password. And this is the password we're going to use in our lab environment. It's the phrase password with a capital P, a capital W, and the number 0 for the O, and at the end an exclamation mark. Click Finish, and after a few moments you will get the logon screen. So click on Input, Keyboard, and insert Ctrl-Alt-Delete, because you cannot press it directly on your keyboard. Well, you can with the shortcut. And enter the password we have set in the last prompt. The first login will take some time. And since we are setting up a server, we do want it to be visible in the network. So in this prompt on the right side of the screen, click Yes. Now we're going to open a command prompt. Right click on it and say Run as administrator. and enter the command sconfig, like server config. After you hit enter, a nice little tool opens, which you might not have seen by now, which gives you the opportunity to configure some basic things of your server with just a few entries, and it's a real time saver. I use it all the time. The first thing we're going to do is to download all available Windows updates and install them. So enter option 6 and enter. Choose A for all, and it will search for applicable updates and list them. And again choose A for all to install all updates. This again will take quite some time. Go grab another cup of coffee. After a few minutes, half an hour, depending on the speed of your system, you will get a prompt asking you to restart the computer. We will not do that now because we have to restart it later anyway. So click no on this prompt. Hit return, and we have to rename our computer. So select option 2 by entering 2 and enter. And then we enter the name of our server, acme-dc01. Again, we're being asked to restart our server, and this time we're choosing yes. As you notice, the Windows updates are still being installed during the reboot, which will again take some time, so grab another coffee. Log in again after the last reboot has completed. And now we're going to check that the host has really been renamed to acme-dc01. So open a command prompt and enter the command hostname. And as you can see, the host is called acme-dc01. We can shut down the virtual PC for the moment. So right click on the Windows sign, choose shut down, and say other planned. Click continue, and the system will shut down. There's one more important thing we have to do after this installation, which is to create a snapshot. A snapshot enables you to go back to the time you've created the snapshot with almost no effort at all. For that, choose the newly created acme-dc01, go to Tools, Snapshots, and click on Take. So this will take a snapshot. Enter a descriptive name for the snapshot so you can later find it more easy. We call our snapshot Basic Setup. Click OK, and that concludes our lesson for today. You now have a Windows Server 2019 with a basic installation. The server is still connected by NAT of Oracle VirtualBox to your internet. In one of the future videos, we are going to change that as soon as we have set up the router for our lab. Stay tuned, subscribe and ring the bell. See you next time.